Good afternoon. Thanks for working with our schedule. I was in Washington, D.C. since Sunday afternoon. Got back yesterday afternoon and had some great conversations with our leadership, both at the Senate side and House side, talking mainly about the airport expansion and advocating for the continued funding through FAA. We were fortunate to receive $4 million federally last year. I'm closing the books on that as we speak. Excuse me. And then we're continue to advocate for our to stay within that FAA terminal program. We expect that to open this summer. And we obviously not only speaking with our Florida delegation, but our Alabama delegation as well. As you know, we have a significant amount of customer base coming in from Baldwin County and other parts of Alabama, and it kind of helps when Alabama congressman in Alabama House 1 uses your airport a lot too. So it doesn't take a long time to translate the value of all the direct flights and all the amazing things happening at the airport. So we talked a lot about that, about our manufacturing at the port with American Magic going hand in hand, and all the cool things that are going to be happening there in the future, and was able to talk about all sorts of stuff. From we've got Senator Scott and I talked about child care access and why that's a workforce issue. We talked a lot about public-private partnerships and trying to cut some red tape. I had shared that example I shared with you guys that with a fellow mayor in South Carolina where they funded houses that cost them about $150,000 to build, and when they used federal money, they cost $325,000 to build. So all of a sudden, that federal grant that you got isn't so valuable when you're just using the extra dollars on a lot of red tape. And so I was encouraged to hear that Senator Scott's office has been taking that on, and we told them we'd be at the ready to help. The meeting last week with Baptist, I felt was very productive. I felt like having all of that happen in one conversation at one time, and the city being able to share those facts and clear up some confusion on timelines and on the what and why of everything. I can't speak for them. I think was helpful. I know we appreciated the opportunity to do that, and we're now ready to get to the table with them and see if we can figure out something creatively that allows the county to be committed to this project, but do it in a way that makes the best financial sense for them, which I certainly can appreciate. And I think we've shown a pretty good track record in almost 3 years so far of trying to figure out ways to get something across the finish line when it's not general fund dollars, or it's whether it be our grants office or CRAs or anything else. So I'm encouraged by that, and looking forward to having deeper conversations with county commissioners, county staff on how to get there. We got a few different road-related things, parades and otherwise, that I want to give you guys. First, we're announcing that beginning Monday, July 7th, after the holiday, that a 2-block portion of Main Street between A and E, ultimately in front of Joe Patty's there, will be closed as part of that enormous stormwater project that right now has B Street closed if you went by there today. But that closure is part of a large flood mitigation project, and at some point we got to go across Main, and so that's what we're going to be doing. And so traffic on Main Street will be detoured via Zaragoza along A and C, so you'll still be able to get around, but obviously that'll be with lots of folks going between the beach and base. We want to make sure that this timeline originally, when it hit our desk, was going to be a little shorter for this to start. We actually pushed it back really to the limit that we could to ensure that you guys could share with residents. We'll have our signage out there and everything. So we got this out a few weeks in advance to make sure people can plan accordingly. It will be a pretty lengthy closure. We're looking at right now, pending weather, about a September 5th completion. So it's a pretty sizable closure there, and B Street will remain closed for an additional 20 days following the reopening of Main Street. So you remember, this is the project that will have a positive flood mitigation impact for almost 1,800 houses in that area. You guys know, you covered it yourselves probably several times, that when it rains hard enough for enough minutes, that F Street along Main is one of the places that is one of our worst flood-prone areas, and this is helping address that. And so, like any good thing that comes with construction, there's a little bit of inconvenience, and we wanted to get that word out as soon as possible. Invite again. We've mentioned the Resiliency Seminar is on Thursday, June 12th, from 8:30 to 4:30 at Sanders Beach, and I'll be speaking and there'll be presentations and panel discussions from state, regional, and local agencies, and there's more information on the website. Yard waste delays. I know there's been some reporting out there. We've tried to get word out, not just waiting, that we've had some delays with yard waste collection services. We are addressing those challenges. We do have staffing issues. Number one, sanitation crews are out working 6 days a week to manage the increased volume of yard waste right now while we're navigating some of these resource constraints that we have. And some of those challenges are being addressed. We're aggressively recruiting new drivers and sanitation staff. That is posted on our website. Please spread the word of anybody that would be interested in that. That is open and available now. We are actually cross-training Pensacola Energy personnel. One of the changes we made is that energy and sanitation is under Daryl Singleton right now, and this was actually one of the reasons we did that. Was there's lots of similarities with the gas company in terms of trucks and equipment. The trucks do different things, but in terms of people being trained and staffed to be out in the field. So we are cross-training some Pensacola Energy personnel to help fill some of those gaps. We're prioritizing equipment maintenance and repair, I think, in an approved way, and we're also optimizing our collection routes. So we're really doing some modernization to these things, not only for this temporary inconvenience, but for the long game of making sanitation more successful. So we still encourage residents to continue placing their yard waste at the curbside and not in the street on their scheduled collection day. On the garbage collection, again, with a holiday, with it being Thursday, June 19th, the tennis center, the golf course will be open under regular hours. Monday, Tuesday, and Friday will see no change. The only change is if you are a Thursday sanitation customer in any way, it will be 1 day early on Wednesday, and we will always get calls when we've got to move it 1 day early because people won't get the message. So hopefully they do. Every Monday, Tuesday, Friday as normal. The Thursday service, if you get Thursday service, it will now be happening on Wednesday next week. So heads up on that. The MLK Day Parade, Thursday, June 19th, was going to be starting at 11. We've spoken with organizers already this morning because of some concerns with heat. Our teams met last week and discussed this. I know police and fire were meeting again this morning about it. We have moved in concert with the organizers. We have moved it from 11 a.m. to 10 a.m. to give some, at least certainly some relief of being earlier, and it will be limited to 2 hours. It'll be from 10 to noon. And the road closures will, of course, begin on 7:30 on Thursday morning. I would warn, although it is a federal holiday and there's many people that will be off, obviously with this holiday, not all private businesses, so please heed that warning that the road closures will begin around 7:30. So if you are working in the downtown area, you will still be able to get to where you need to go. There just might be a little more inconvenience, and we will not shut down Main Street until an hour before the parade, which would now be at 9 a.m. So that will be as normal. I'm planning to meet with the organizers. I've been out of town the last few days, but I'm meeting with the organizers either tomorrow, at some point this week, to discuss this. I know one conversation that came up because of the heat was having an ambulance on site, and there were some concerns about their ability to be able to fund that. The city will be funding to ensure that there's an ambulance on site. And of course, that leads into a larger parade conversation that you guys have asked me about before, about these, increasing costs to be able to put these types of things on. But that's neither here nor there for next week. We're going to make sure this happens, and we're going to make sure that people are safe when they're out there. So we couldn't warn enough, and you will hear me talk about it next week. That please make sure you're staying hydrated and in the shade and doing all the normal precautions that if you're going to be out in the sun, even at 10 a.m., it still will be quite warm. So no parking signs are already up if you're out there out and about now. The Miraflores Burial Ground Marker Ceremony at 1601 East LaRue Street will be on Tuesday, June 17th at 9 a.m. So we'll have that small historic marker of how we're reinterring the remains that were found several years ago. And that conversation of how we commemorate may still continue, but this was kind of the first step with our grant and everything. So that will be at 9 a.m. On Tuesday. The remains were found back in 2021, and that, as a reminder, that burial ground study determined that 80 possible unmarked graves are in the park, and we identified that through GPR. And so I believe our plan is to dovetail the press conference around that Tuesday at 9 a.m. I will mention, I know there was conversation at CRA on Monday about Veo Scooters. That's something that I've been on a phone call with them that we're looking at in a detailed, discerning way. There are some perceived advantages and benefits to it, but I think there are some detriments to it that we've tried to evolve this relationship with Veo and with back when there were stand-up scooters as well, trying to find that right mix of what works best for our community and whether this works long-term at all. So those are, I know there was some discussion. I have not listened to that entire discussion I know it came up in CRA, and but we continue to have those conversations. As a matter of fact, I think I'm talking coincidentally at the Seville Neighborhood Association tonight. I expect to be asked about that in the neighborhood as well, and I think we're going to be doing some measuring, some data collection of our own in terms of what our residents' approval rating or usage is, not just the people using them, but also what the impact is on our surrounding neighborhoods. And so I've looked at a lot of that data and analyzed it, and so that contract does come up at some point this fall. And I had a call with them last week, and so that conversation will continue. A decision doesn't need to be made next week or even next month necessarily, but we are getting to the end of this 3-year contract that started before me, and we got to see what the right situation is with Veo. So we're looking into that. Last 2 things I've got. You guys are aware. Ken is here from the airport on any. If you have questions on Silver Airways, I know we've already publicized that, and that's out there, and that they've shut down operations. No significant impacts to PNS operations overall, other than of course the canceled flights, and to just continue to stay close to the Pensacola Airport social media. But any questions that you guys may have on that, we'll probably have Ken answer those for you. Anything on the technical side. And last thing is we've got Parks and Recs Movies in the Park returns to the Maritime Park on June 14th, and that is a free event open to the community. Pre-show events or activities begin at 6 p.m. On June 14th. So glad to have that back. And that is everything I've got, and happy to take your questions.
2 questions for you, Mayor.
Sure.
First one on the Silver Airlines. What was your reaction when you saw that sudden announcement? No heads up even to the airport.
Well, obviously we've been aware and been made aware of the financial situation, the bankruptcy filings and things like that. So I wouldn't say that the overall action, I'm not going to speak for the airport, for me, the overall action wasn't necessarily a surprise. And I would say it's relatively customary that in a situation like this, where you're going through a bankruptcy situation, that there's not going to typically be a 3-week or 6-week kind of operational run. It's just too expensive, and that's not what the holding company that was taking over has decided to do, of course. So in a perfect world, I would love for every resident or visitor to have had a longer advance notice. But in these, it's very customary in these situations that if it's going to be something over bankruptcy, that it's going to be an abrupt decision. And hopefully everybody's been able to be accommodated as much as possible. We do have just the one route. It's pretty limited service, very very small piece of what's going on out at the airport, and so that's where we're at now.
And the second question about yard waste, when it comes to any sort of storm that were to come this way, be it a hurricane or not, knock on wood, being that far out in debris, is there a contingency to get some of that stuff picked up if we were to have a bad storm coming this way?
Yeah, I mean, listen, everything changes with when we have a storm, an emergency related event. I never thought in my entire life I'd be we'd be calling about snowplows. So everything changes, all the time. I can tell you what my contingency about snowplows was before we started making phone calls, and it was none. But you adapt and you make it work. I'm fully confident in our public works team, our energy team, sanitation, our third-party providers that we have contracts with for these exact reasons, in terms of waste, debris, all of those types of things. So, we're trying to do the best we can within our normal operations. We certainly don't consider this, an emergency at any point, what's happening currently. But if something were to arise, as they have always done, I feel full confidence in our team that we would answer the bell.
Mayor, on the Main Street flooding project, how is the access to Joe Patty's going to work while this is underway? Are people still going to be able to access the parking lot there?
Yes, I would have to get you specifics. I'd have to get a traffic engineer there. When I say from A to C, I'm sure it's going to be on the west side of A in terms of being able to access that site. A lot of that work is happening on B Street, but it's just a matter of when we say closing from A to C, there's always going to be a buffer. It's not going to be, there won't be a crane or something, right behind the road closure. It'll be a little further down. So, I've been given no indication that obviously without A and without B, you wouldn't be able to get in there almost at all. So, or not almost, you wouldn't be able to. So, that has not been indicated to me that we would have any type of closure like that. So, my expectation, sight unseen from the map itself, would be that you'll still be able to access at the light at Main and A Street in and out.
Mayor, on the Baptist demolition, as you and Commissioner Kohler and the other commissioners continue to nub this down to the
Right.
resolution, your position has been that your CRA is fully encumbered in the coming year. Does that mean you have no flexibility in there? And is the number of 1.6 million in 25-26 TIF, does that sound about right?
I'd hate to go sight unseen and tell you what the exact number would be. Listen, every CRA has priorities, and whether it be for an emergency, a hurricane, anything else, of course those are things that can change. But with that comes sacrifice. I mean, we're patching roofs in the West Side CRA from Hurricane Sally. I don't know how good I feel about moving money to this project at the moment, and ending a program like that has a long waiting list and stuff. And so, of course. But let me be clear: we are using West Side CRA money, but and maybe it's our fault in messaging. But the idea, this notion that funding ends at demolition, is just not reality. And so I fully expect that future West Side CRA funds are going to be used to fund this project. And if you recall from the conversation from 2 hours ago, or the 2-hour conversation, last week, that we're 600 under the current proposal and the current $2 million expectation. The city's got to go find $600,000 today, ultimately, to meet the contingency and everything else. So we haven't crossed that bridge, but if we look at it in the silo of that mission accomplished after demolition, then it would come across as, oh, well, we aren't spending additional CRA funds. I don't look at it that way, because myself and the next mayor or two are going to need to be using funds to help subsidize getting this thing ready to go. So I fully expect we're going to be using West Side CRA funds. So I don't choose to look at it in the silo of, am I deciding to use those funds today on demolition, or will we never have to do it? I fully expect we'll be using millions of dollars of future CRA funds on this project.
One of the other outcomes of Thursday's meeting was, I think, a little bit of surprise to the public that Commissioner May had negotiated with the Baptist leadership over the previous weekend to obtain those two parcels, those two buildings, that you have first right of refusal. Mm-hmm. And his comments were, the mayor and I are going to work this out. Is that your expectation? And how does that affect this capital stack that you've got?
So let's back up and say, why do those rights of first refusal exist? they existed because those were going to be parcels that Baptist was going to keep possession of. We were never promised that we were given possession. Those are on the other side of E Street. And it's because they're using them actively at the moment. So they are not part of the acreage that has been proposed. So to help defend the CRA and the city long term was to say, if we're going to stack this demolition funding together, if we're going to work on this for years and years and years, I think it would be logical of us and common sense to ensure that if and when those parcels were ever to be sold, that the city would have a bite at the apple, right? Because across the street, we would have done all this work and all this remediation. And so why would we have Baptist or an organization that was one of our partners be able to just sell it to anybody they want to the highest bidder with no conversation from us? So that was something I, working with Adam Cobb, had personally put in there to say, we don't need them. We just want to be able to have a say in case they were to go on the market. So it wasn't we were promised, the city, we could have walked away from that right of first refusal and then they could sell it to anybody they wanted. So if I did that to protect the community good. And if I believe that what Commissioner May is proposing is also the community good. So I have no problem conveying so long conditionally that they're going to the county or to community health, something like that, they have the ability to do that, because those are great uses that would only support what's happening across the street. So I'm more than amenable to that. We just didn't want to do a lot of work on one side of the road, and on the other side of the road, we're improving property values of which can then be sold to anybody, and we have no ability to influence it. So if they can get something worked out on that side, and certainly whether that helps build confidence in the county's commitment financially or otherwise, I think that's a great thing for one of those rare win-win-wins. So looking forward to seeing if that can become something.
Maybe the budget get close to being able to reveal that. What type of valuation increase are we seeing inside the city?
In terms of property?
Percentage, yeah, property value.
I'll have to pull the exact number. I can tell you those indicators are obviously slowing trajectory on property value and slowing trajectory on sales tax from what we've seen in the previous years. I'd hate to tell you, I might know the number, but I don't want to misquote it. And we can get you those. But we are seeing, I wouldn't say a flattening, but a flatter trajectory than what we've seen in the years previous. So as I've said to you, previously, we're taking this at a little more of a defensive posture in this budget than we have in a couple years previous, because of those two key factors.
Well, I guess we've got a lot of projects, but we don't have the value. The property hasn't been valued yet, have been completed. Because when you look at your new construction, should be part of your new valuations.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and remember, I mean, the last 2 years, the interest rates have had a big impact on new construction and renovation. And so it's not just the cost; it's the cost of goods plus interest. So another good data point to look at along those lines always. And again, I can't recite you the exact number, is how many permits are being pulled within the city. And so it is why we want to foster growth and smart growth, because there is no faster increase to our revenue stream than new property development and property value, to your point. And so, yes, we want new property on the books to help continue to fund police and fire and everything else. So we can get you, I'm sure Amy Lavoie can get you, and Dominique can help get exact numbers on whatever trend line we're working off of. But I can tell you early, the indication is we are approaching this budget differently, because we are seeing those two numbers start to plateau a little more than the angle they were at previously.
And this will be the last year of the pay increase?
That's correct.
Right.
And it's a very small amount.
Right.
The third year was always kind of a throw. It was rounding everything off.
And then that becomes the number from then on?
That's correct.
Right. Okay.
That's correct.
No problem.
Yep.
When you say you're approaching it defensively, are you, can you kind of elaborate on that? Are y'all not creating positions that you otherwise would have created, or you're?
Yeah, I mean, positions is part of it. And when we rolled out the salary study, I was very clear that we needed to focus on quality before we were focusing on quantity. And meaning, what's the use of having lots of jobs that we can't fill because we aren't paying competitively, versus if we've got to figure out what's our bandwidth, but we're doing it by paying in a quality way. And I think that's a key to success within entrepreneurship in private business, and there's no reason that doesn't convey over to government. I've just been a believer in starting with making sure everybody's paid competitively, really for two reasons. One is for the quality of work, and that you don't have these empty positions that are ultimately budgeted, right? We can't spend that money if it's in the budget, but if they never get filled, then it was kind of, that's not a good maximum use of the dollars, first of all. And then secondly is, competitive pay also creates accountability to the citizen, accountability to directors and administrators. And, it's kind of hard when, if you're not paying competitively, if every conversation always has the rationalization of, oh, well, if we paid more, then we'd be able to do X, Y, and Z. So we kind of wanted to take that off the table, pay our amazing workers a fair wage, and be able to know that we can get the productivity out of those jobs that we need to. So to answer your question, listen, we're gonna look at everything from an equipment standpoint. Obviously, pay and salary is an enormous part of the budget, and it's a recurring part of the budget. Listen, even within our own office, we have an open position now that, we're discussing whether we would keep it the way it is or kind of move it down, lower the pay a little bit, change the responsibilities. That's not just for other departments to analyze. That's for me to analyze in my office right now. So I'm not going to say we are not walking in with a mandate of saying, oh, we've got to eliminate this or this many vehicles or this many jobs. We are not presenting it that way. We're going to do the best we can to keep working in the direction that we are. But every department in the city should be as resourceful as possible to continue to provide the service that we provide, and figure out how to make the budget work. So that's not me having a defensive posture. Doesn't mean we're committed to a hard line about one exact thing. It's just we've got to have a little bit more of a kind of a one in, one out type of scenario, dollars wise, than we've needed to have in previous years.
On the scooters issue, I guess you say you're going to do surveys, but you said you looked at the data yourself. I guess what's your read on, or what's your opinion of the scooters as is today?
Yeah, so listen, the overall idea, and I had this conversation with Mayor Robinson when he was gracious enough to allow me to hang around the building for those few months before I was sworn in, which I always am grateful for. I remember having a conversation with him about it at the time to say, hey, I think the city lacks the same equal infrastructure that some larger cities have that have this program, that have dedicated bike lanes, because a lot of the complaints I think locally is the confusion between whether you should be on the sidewalk or you should be on the street. And so that's no one's fault. It's not the rider's fault, it's not the city's fault, but I think there's some real infrastructure questions that need to be answered. I'm as big a proponent of bikeability and walkability and what that means for building a sense of place in a city. But that, can we make this work? And the conversation I had with Mayor Robinson was really centered around the stand-up scooters, and to say, all right, well, let's try to evolve this. And if you think about the evolutions we've taken, one is we've eliminated the standing scooters. We went to only seated with the hopes of seeing them more in the road as they're supposed to be and less on the sidewalk. We saw some issues on Palafox Street. We banned Palafox Street, so that it turns off. The Veos turn off right now on Palafox. We moved the curfew to midnight. So over this 3-year contract, we've tried to do the best we can to kind of mitigate those things. What we need to analyze now is it feasible, given those circumstances that also hinder Veo's business, right? If you can't be on Palafox, if you're only open until midnight, that affects their business model. So can we come up with something that works is the real question. And some of the data I've looked at is, obviously you see ridership go up at night, later at night. One of the positive benefits of a program like this is somebody with accessibility that may not otherwise have access to a car. That was a big conversation about this early on. We haven't seen that type of use significantly and consistently versus, more of the fun and gun kind of use downtown, in later hours. But that doesn't mean it isn't providing value for people. So I want to look into that. I've looked at the hour by hour data, the day, hour by day. And I really think the big conversation is let's see how our citizens feel about it. I do get complaints about it. There's no doubt about it, about laying on the sidewalk, about, being on the sidewalk. But, you guys know me long enough now. I try to deal less in hyperbole and more in, real numbers. And so I don't want to react one way or the other to 3 emails this way or 4 emails that way. But Veo has survey data from users, but they don't have survey data necessarily from the residents of which the streets and sidewalks are being used. So we're going to use some of our outreach, and that's really the key number for me, Jim, is I want to look at what do our neighbors and our residents feel. And if it's not something that they feel brings them quality of life and sense of place and all of those things, then it's my job to listen to that and adjust from there.
Mayor, as long as Mr. Eyebold is here, can we ask him about terminal expansion?
Sure.
Is this a fair game? I mean,
Well, I just volunteered him, so yeah.
So are Airways.
The boss says yes.
Ken told me as we came in, there's no shortage of discussion about the absence of Silver Airways. So, Ken, could you elaborate on the industry's, may not be in your wheelhouse, but the industry's demand for operational space at P&S?
Well, so,
Gates or a Sky Warrior or whatever is going on out there. Is
Well,
it growing, and how are you accommodating them?
certainly there are space constraints at the terminal. That's why we're embarking on the expansion project that we are. And so that's a function of gate space, ticket counter space, airline ticket office space, bag claim capacity. All that stuff is all wrapped in together. We have the ability to do more with what we have, but we get to this point of diminishing returns where it gets harder to add airlines without the additional space. Now, with Silver, whether they come back or not, if another airline were to step up and say, hey, we want to provide service, we'll find a way to make it happen. So, we're not that concerned about any short-term implications of Silver, either being gone for good or coming back, because I think we can make that work. In terms of the capacity of the rest of the facility, you mentioned Sky Warrior. We're there as public infrastructure. So if people want to use our facility, that's what it's there for. Find a way to make it work.
Are you satisfied with the expanded parking options out there now?
Well, so the parking situation is a very dynamic one. We are currently designing, so we recently paved the new lot that's on Tippin. We are currently designing an expansion of that lot to about another 400 spaces. What we anticipate that to be used for is we have in our capital plan a new parking garage, but we need to find a place to put the cars that would be offloaded in order to construct the parking garage. And so that's one of the reasons why we're going to expand that Tippin lot. This is a multi-year, the parking it's going to take a long time to fix it because parking garages take a long time to build. They're expensive. We have a lot of capital needs, but it's in our program, and we will make sure that no cars will ever get turned away from Pensacola Airport for passengers who want to park there.
Do you think the parking price points now are adequate, or are you looking at an adjustment? Mayor, y'all raised them last year, right? I think it was last year.
That's always, pricing is always a dynamic thing. Our prices are currently set by city ordinance. So, that discussion would have to be had with city council.
And I can add to that and say, I get very involved in the parking business, whether I like it or not. That I would say anecdotally, the conversation parking as a whole, the data would suggest that we're very affordable. The data, that's what I'll leave it at that. I would say the data suggests that we are very affordable, and whether that's the data itself or folks who travel in here or from other airports, and so that's always an ongoing conversation, like it is in a downtown or anytime you have paid parking. So.
Ken, we know that May was a very busy month. We had the music festival, we had Memorial Day weekend. How's June shaping up as far as passengers and how the days running now?
So historically, June and July have always been our busiest months. May was up from last year. Year to date, we're up about 5% from last year, which was our record year. June, we don't get the reports in until, well, today I think we should get our May reports in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that data now.
How's it feel though? I mean, as far as is it more crowded? How's the TSA working?
TSA is actually working really well, and in that we have had some additional discussions with TSA about adding an additional screening lane to our checkpoint, and we are we've gotten some very positive feedback in terms of adding that fifth set of machinery, and we should be able to maybe go into construction on that later this year. So once we get that fifth lane, that will increase our throughput, make the lines a little bit shorter. They have expressed that they will also staff it correctly when and if that line is put into service.
Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't forget to thank Senator Scott and many others that sent letters, but Congressman Gates and others, but Senator Scott helping us lead the charge on that big issue that we were having last year, and I was able to relay to him. We had our busiest day of all time at the airport, and our average wait was 13 minutes. And so it was nice to not just be up there asking for something, but to share the good news of good collaboration. And as a matter of fact, I sent a letter to all the council members and the mayor out in Gulf Shores about they were having some community conversation about the value of this music festival that they had, and I felt compelled to send them a letter to say, well, we did have our busiest day of all time the morning after after it, and so there's some good positive impact that's not just in Gulf Shores that's happening because of it. So I sent them all a letter to convey that as well. So.
Mayor, I took advantage
Thanks,
of one of your pop-up TSA sign-up programs recently.
Uh-huh.
And it was a little bit, they told me it was a little bit underutilized. They didn't sell out all the scheduled appointments, but the staff, the TSA staff or the contractors that were doing it, said that they're from New Orleans and they would welcome any opportunity to come back to PNS for those pop-up, they call them pop-up enrollment
Yeah,
programs.
uh-huh. Yeah, and we've done them many times since I've been here. I think it was 600 plus, if I remember Matt's number right. And during the meeting, he had said we got 600 and something more folks signed up for TSA. It's interesting. I'm not sure about the scheduled appointments. Typically, our problem is they get filled up so quickly. I got my own family saying, I can't get a spot in there, and I remind them sometimes you can get a little success by showing up still, and and they might squeeze you in, but it's typically been great, and I'm sure between airport logistics and TSA, the more we can do that and get people through the line, the better.
They were doing it up in Matt and Kim's conference room.
Yeah,
They
that's
were
where.
taking over the headquarters space up there.
Yeah, we were seeing if they could, work on get some labor too while we're up there in the administrative offices. So anyway, no, it's been good. It's been good, and we typically have a pretty robust turnout every time they show up. Anything else? All right, thank you guys.